This presentation involves the third of our principles of ethics, the principle of autonomy. We have already considered the principle of non-maleficence, which points to our belief that harming another person is wrong, or at least that it is seriously morally problematic. And the principle of beneficence, which points to our positive duties to prevent harm, to address harm or injury, and to act in ways that enhance people's welfare. Now we turn to the principle of autonomy. Let me say something first simply about the word autonomy. Autonomy is a compound word that combines auto and nomos. Auto means self, as in automobile, a self-moving vehicle. Nomos is the idea of rule or law. So autonomy refers to ruling oneself or being subject to one's own rules, norms, or laws. Let me also say, by way of introduction, that you should be aware that I will be using the word autonomy in two different ways, and that we often use it in two different ways. Sometimes we are referring simply to the human capacity for self-rule, for autonomy. But we also use the word autonomy to refer to the moral principle, which suggests things we may not do or things we should do because of this human capacity for autonomy. Autonomy as a reference to the human capacity, autonomy as a moral principle. Let me speak first of autonomy as a moral principle. Autonomy as a moral principle requires us to let other people do what they want to do, given their own capacity for autonomy. This means most significantly that coercion is prohibited, or that coercion of another person is seriously morally problematic, as is any manipulation of them. So autonomy requires us not to coerce or manipulate. In professional context, the principle of autonomy has been understood as suggesting that people who work for us in their professional capacities should cooperate with our autonomous choices, or that you as a professional have an obligation to cooperate with your patients or your clients' autonomous choices. And in a medical context, we will see an important implication of the principle of autonomy is that we should use our professional skills to help folks achieve and maintain their capacity for autonomy. You will recall that we referred to non-maleficence as a negative principle because it tells us what we may not do, and beneficence is a positive principle because it requires us to act or do things. Autonomy is generally a principle whose implications are negative. It tells us that we may not coerce or manipulate, or that coercion and manipulation are seriously morally problematic and therefore require moral justification. So, according to the principle of autonomy, do not coerce, do not manipulate. Let's think a bit about what coercion and manipulation are. I'm showing you here a picture from the classic movie The Godfather. There's a famous scene in The Godfather where he tells a potential business partner, either your signature or your brains will be on this contract. Obviously, the Godfather was threatening the potential business partner with death were he to refuse to agree to sign the contract. That's classic example of coercion. We coerce people when we threaten them with death, with injury, some profound harm, unless they do what we want them to do. In the healthcare context, a person might threaten to put a parent in a nursing home unless they agree to do what the child wants them to do. A threat of that nature would be considered coercive or coercion. Manipulation is a somewhat milder form of violating a person's capacity for autonomy and violating the principle of autonomy. Probably deception, lying, or intending to have someone believe something that you know to not be the truth, is the classic form that manipulation takes. So when we lie to someone, we give them false information, precisely because we want them to believe what we want them to believe, rather than what they would believe if they knew the truth. So lying and deception of any sort are classic forms that manipulation takes. The principle of autonomy prohibits manipulation or regards it as seriously morally problematic. In recent years, the principle of autonomy has been the basis for profound concern about human relationships where there is an imbalance of power. That is to say, where one person in the relationship clearly has power of some sort over the other person in the relationship. We might think of professional relationships where teachers have a certain amount of power over their students, or lawyers over their clients, or healthcare professionals over their patients. Clearly in a work context where one has a boss or a supervisor, that boss or supervisor has some kind of power in relation to the employee. Now, the concern is that where that imbalance of power exists, there is a potential for abusing or violating the autonomy of the weaker party. So, for example, when a boss makes a sexual advance toward an employee, or a teacher toward a student, or a healthcare professional toward a patient, there is a concern that even if the advance is made persuasively or apparently non-coercively, because of the imbalance of power, there is always an element of coercion. And this is part of the reason that almost every professional code of ethics prohibits forming intimate relationships or sexual relationships with students, with clients, with patients. The concern is that the imbalance in the power relationship turns what appears to be a non-coercive, non-manipulative relationship into one in which there is an actual element of coercion involved. Finally, let me point out quickly that autonomy in professional contexts does have important positive implications. Autonomy requires us not to coerce, not to manipulate, but it is also thought to require professionals to cooperate with their clients' autonomous choices. If you want me to do something simply as one human being to another, I don't violate your autonomy by refusing to cooperate with what you want me to do. But if I am your lawyer, if I am your physician or your nurse, respect for autonomy would seem to require me to act positively in cooperation with your autonomous choices. Also in the healthcare context, an important goal of our interventions with patients is to maintain and restore their capacity for autonomy. Sometimes an illness or an injury threatens that capacity. Suffering makes us unable to think clearly. If we lose consciousness, obviously, we are unable to think for ourselves. In such contexts, a major goal of the healthcare intervention is to address those symptoms so that the patient can return to full capacity to participate in decisions about their care. So these are both positive implications of the principle of autonomy: cooperation with our clients' or patients' choices, and attention to maintaining and restoring their capacity to make choices autonomously. Next time, we will look more deeply at the basis for our appreciation for the moral principle of autonomy, and we will consider issues related to persuasion and autonomy. Next time